Business news at this hour. Economists are not too optimistic about the expected economic growth figures from Stats SA expected later today. Now a contraction is anticipated due to heightened power outages, the rising cost of living, intensified interest rate hikes and failing logistics networks. The fourth quarter gross domestic product data comes after growth of 1.6% that was recorded in the third quarter of 2022. That following a 0.7% contraction in the second quarter and a 1.7% rise in the first quarter of last year. Economist Chifipa Mhango speaks to us now to expand on what's expected this time around. Thank you so much for your time, Chifipa. Let's talk about what the market is anticipating.
Well, thank you very much for having me this morning, and morning to our viewers. Well, we're expecting a contraction, mainly informed by so many factors that have been happening in the fourth quarter. I think the key sectors which were really affected the environment in terms of performance of the economy are actually the mining and the manufacturing sector. So those key segments of the South African economy have really been going through a lot of pressure, obviously informed by the load shedding which have been happening in the domestic economy. So that's the key areas where we're seeing that it's going to have to put pressure in terms of the actual number that we have in terms of the GDP data, which we expect obviously a contraction.
How much of a contraction is expected? And I ask this solely to maybe decipher the picture that would be painted of the current status of the South African economy.
Well, I think realistically, we're looking at a decline of 0.5%, as I said, informed by what's been happening in the economy. If you look at the data on the fourth quarter of 2022, for example, the entire mining sector production was actually on the decline, both year-on-year as well as on month-on-month basis. So that actually tells you that why we're seeing this contraction figure which we're expecting coming out today. But also a similar trend coming out from the manufacturing production trend in the fourth quarter of 2022. We're also seeing on a prolonged period where the figures from the October to December were more or less on the negative side. So both on year-on-year as well as on a month-on-month basis. So I think that is actually really informing you that the economy has really been under pressure. If you look at from the consumer aspect point of view, for instance, you also see that the consumer confidence was also low, realistically driven by the rising cost of living, and obviously I think more informed by the food prices as well as the transport costs. Also in the same quarter, you also seeing, for example, business confidence at the index level of 38. That is relatively low if you compare to the previous months or the previous quarter where we had at least improvement in terms of the economy at 1.6% in the third quarter. So business confidence was actually lower in the fourth quarter of 2022. So putting all those issues into factoring all those aspects that I've mentioned, obviously tells you that there is an economy which has been going through under a stressful environment in the 2022 fourth quarter.
Now, with the fourth quarter GDP numbers and the expectation there being of a contraction in economic growth in South Africa, what's to be said about the near-term outlook as we are in 2023, particularly the first quarter of this new year? Where is economic growth expected to be post the budget speech?
Well, one of the key data that you also look at in terms of the confidence of the economy is the PMI data. And I think what we have seen in the latest month of February, we've seen the contraction environment with regard to the PMI data. It's actually trading index below 50. That tells you that the first quarter has actually also been challenging. But I think if you also compare from what has been transpiring on load shedding from the first quarter and fourth quarter, you'll see that there's been more load shedding in the first quarter of 2023. Compared to the fourth quarter of 2022. So that tells you that the depressed environment continues in terms of the economy in 2023. Unless we really address the issue of load shedding, we have massive challenges in terms of how the projected growth from the budget session point of view was actually showing a positive one. But I think realistically, the first quarter 2023 is also showing that we'll still be in a contraction phase domestically.
Now, speaking of load shedding and the speed at which South Africa needs to move at in resolving this crisis, what's the reaction on the side of economists generally and the business sector when it comes to the appointment of a minister for electricity? Does that bode well for a confidence booster that the government is at least heightening their efforts in this regard?
Well, I think that's a political tone in terms of the electricity environment, especially on the appointment of the actual minister looking at after electricity. But I think it's welcome news on the basis of addressing it from the political desk. But I think we still have to look at in terms of how that will be managed, because we don't want to have the situation whereby there is conflict between ministers because of the areas of responsibility. So it has to be stated to say, is the ESCOM going to be reporting under the Ministry of Electricity, or is ESCOM still going to be under the Public Enterprises Ministry? So I think those are challenges we have to be monitoring. And I think we have already seen that from the way we've been operating politically, there has always been an element of tension between the Minister of Energy and also the Minister of Public Enterprise in terms of what is the responsibility of Minister of Energy in terms of ESCOM management. So realistically wise, I think it's still early stages in terms of looking at how best the business can react. I think it's more about trying to see how the environment will be managed with regard to ESCOM and also the appointment of the new Minister of Electricity. So it's still a rough environment with regard to addressing the issues at ESCOM at this stage.
Lastly, Chifipa, what needs to be done in the context of an economic reform framework outside of the energy crisis that needs to be addressed in South Africa to turn the tide where economic growth is concerned?
Well, our challenges, I always say that we still got a number of challenges which can be defined in a cocktail of challenges. For example, our ports are still not functioning well with regard to logistical aspects. We still got challenges in terms of the railway line. I always give an example for instance. It's really becoming very costly to transport raw material to the industrial base or to transport products to the exit ports because of the railway system which is unreliable, but at the same time also costly in terms of how the trade have been going with regard to tariffs. So I think those are the areas that needed to be looked at. Transnet really to beef up in terms of inefficiency issues to make sure the industry is well served with regard to transportation. So those are some of the areas I think we really have to look at in terms of addressing the challenges the country is facing from the industrial base point of view.
Thank you for your input, Economist Chifipa Mhango, talking to us in that preview ahead of the latest GDP reading from Stats SA expected later today at around 11:30.